to Daniel and Bill, and they said, hey, we're doing this film festival here. Would you like to come and talk about monsters? Because I know you're into Bigfoot and chupacabras and other things like that. Today happens to be World Bigfoot Day, so just so you guys all know this.
Cool.
My friends and colleagues are down in the Eastern Texas Bigfoot Conference down in Jefferson today. We were going to be there, but I wanted to come here with my friends and family here in Colorado and Wyoming to talk with you about our own culture. We have monsters, we have phantoms. We don't necessarily have a bunch of Bigfoots, but they've been seen in Mexico too. So what I'm going to talk about today mostly coincides with a lot of folklore from Mexican, Latin American culture. I'm starting off right now with taking us back to around 100 BC to the Mayan people. My ancestry comes from that on my father's side. And this goes with the Quiche Mayan. They are near the Guatemalan border in Mexico. They have the story of Camasotes. Camasotes is our Batman of Mexico, and I'm a big Batman fan. So when I looked at this story, I was like, where does this tie into all these things that are monsters? And what I found about Camasotes is a Mayan death bat. He was one of the 9 lords of the underworld, which was known as Chivalba in Mexico through the Mayan culture. There's the story that goes that there were 2 hero brothers, and their father was captured by the gods in the underworld, and they were going to sacrifice him. The brothers' names were Hunambe and Xiblanque, and they tried to come up with a method to be able to defeat the gods at their own game. The way that you could release his father is they found that you would have to play the Mayan ball game. Of course, to say they had to go through all these levels of the underworld, so they decided that to avoid the main entity that was in the middle of the underworld was Camasotes, the bat god. And Camasotes had the head of a human, but the body of a bat, and he could be about 7 feet tall. He arrived in this cave called the House of Bats. And if you look at history, we have the vampire bat in Mexico. So this is where it kind of ties into reality in this part of the world. It also was known to drip blood from the walls. So Hunambe and his brother decided that the best way to avoid all the bats and wait until the dawn light came so they could rescue their father was to hide and shrink themselves into some blowguns. While they were hiding and waiting for the bats to stop circling and waiting for the sun to come up, Hunambe decides he's going to peek out of the blowgun and see if the coast is clear. Well, it was, but just not for him. Camasotes swoops down, sees Hunambe, takes his head off, and decides he's going to keep Hunambe's head to be used in the next ball game for the gods. Xiblanque finds a way to work around this. Story short, he ends up having to play against the gods in the underworld with his own brother's head to defeat them and get his father's freedom and revive his brother from the underworld. So I've got my notes here because there's a lot of detail, and I don't like to use like slideshows and all other than this loop to give you a visual. But to this day, there is still a bat cult in Mexico. They come from the Zacatec people near Oaxaca, and I'll be talking a little bit more about them as we go along into some of these other stories. The next subject that I'm going to go into, this one particularly, to this day, a lot of Mexican people like to tell their children about los duendes. And duendes are our version of goblins and gnomes. And they particularly like to inhabit homes. And in the home, they particularly like to stay where children's bedrooms are. They like to hide in walls and cabinets, behind couches. And some of the video loop here, you'll see these videos taken from Mexico where it shows these little gnomes, and they look like your yard gnomes and all that. But these goblins are known to stay around a lot of the forest and stuff too. And so if they get the chance, they'll come out in the middle of the night when children are sleeping, and they don't like unkempt kids, so they will wait till the kids are asleep, and then they'll come up and clip their toenails. Some of them get carried away with cleaning up the kids' toenails and end up taking up the whole toe. So the parents will tell their children, do not let your toes hang over the edge of the bed, or the duendes are going to come and they'll take your toes. I was talking to my girlfriend, her people are from Italy, and coincidentally, because of the Iberian and Latin American culture there, they also talk about these types of creatures that will come and take your toes. So I'm like, it follows a lot of other cultures. There is a huge tree in Oaxaca, Mexico, known as the Tree of Life. It's a big old cottonwood tree. And it's so huge that a whole group of school children one day took a picture around it holding hands. Case in point, families like to take picnics down here in Oaxaca, and there's a giant tree like that called the higuera tree. They partake to that tree because it's so hot in Mexico, like under these lights right now for me, so my apologies. They like to take shade there in the hot sun, but they always tell their children, don't stray behind, because if you do, the duendes are going to come out of the trees, and they're going to take you back up into the trees, and we're never going to see you again. Needless to say, that keeps your children on point and saying, we're going to go. And they're in Mexican culture, this is funny, we always have this little saying, hurry up or we're going to leave you. And if you tell them the duende story, I don't think they're wasting time anymore. At least my kids, I think, no, they're going to, let's hurry up and get out of the store. Maybe there's some duendes here, they're going to clip our toes off. So things like that. But they continue to be seen in the mountain ranges of Oaxaca and the Zapotec region. As we go into the next story, I'm going to tell you about a thing called El Cadejo. Cadejo is a supernatural character from Central American folklore. There's a good white Cadejo and an evil black Cadejo. Cadejo Negra and Cadejo Blanco. Both the spirits appear at night to travelers. In the beginning, God saw that when people were traveling alone in the forest and all, to keep them safe, he created this spirit animal, the white Cadejo, to protect them on their journeys, and also to protect intoxicated people from being robbed by burglars and other people like that. So while that's going on, the devil sees that, oh, he's going to create his own Cadejo, which is the Cadejo Negra. However, his has the smell of like a goat, hooves like a goat, red coal eyes, and chains around him. Now, it is said that people have attempted to fight off a Cadejo, but it's been impossible. You're also warned to never look one in the eyes, or it will drive you insane. You're also warned to never talk to them, or it can induce insanity. Another thing is, if you turn your back and you show any fear to the black Cadejo, it will devalue you instantly. And there have been stories of people saying that they were lost on their travels and their family members were killed by this. If you're lucky enough, if your faith stayed true, then God will send the white one to protect you, and it ends up in battle fighting off the black Cadejo. Most of these are still seen in El Salvador and still more in Central America. I'm going to break off from this story a little bit and tell you something personal from my own family. I had a great-grandfather, my great-grandfather Porfirio. That's actually my middle name. And in Mexico, you know, our culture, there's a lot of superstition. You see it everywhere in good magic and black magic. My great-grandpa liked to meddle with the black arts. And our family, from back then, they were always saying, you know, in Spanish, they're telling me, stop messing with that or the devil's going to come for you. And he's like, whatever, he did his own thing. In those days, you would walk the streets. They weren't paved like they are now here. And there's still a lot of streets in Mexico that are like that. And you would carry your pistol on your side to protect yourself. My grandpa liked to go out and gamble late at night, and he liked to drink a lot. And one night, while he's walking home from one of his card games, it's very calm, it's a moonlit night, He's able to kind of see his way home. And this tumbleweed comes up next to him. And it starts talking to him. And it calls out his name. And he's like, probably thinking to himself, am I just drunk or whatever? So he doesn't care. He's doing his thing. He's stumbling home. He's got to get home to Grandma before she kills him, you know. So as it's calling out his name and saying who it is, it said it was the devil. And he freaks out and he pulls out his pistol and he starts shooting at it and it laughs at him. It's mocking him. It's like, yeah, you're not going to kill me. He's hurrying and getting home. Meanwhile, Grandma's off in the distance, hearing Grandpa getting home like he should have been home hours ago. Here's the gunfires. No, it's sounding like him. So she rushes to the door, waiting for him to come home. And he's finally getting to the house. And he's in such a panic. He's pasty white and he falls flat on his face. She's like, what the heck? So he finally tells her later on what happened. You think that would be enough to tell him, okay, yeah, I'm done. I'm not going to mess with this stuff anymore. Nah, he didn't. Case in point, how this ties in with the Cadejo stuff. The grandparents and all the elders and the aunties used to like to play their cards all together on the weekends. Grandpa's there. They're all playing one night. And this big gust of wind just, bam, knocks the front door open. And everybody looks and they're like, they're just thinking it's the wind. To Grandpa, he's seeing this big black dog with red fiery eyes coming towards him. And he's telling him, he says, El Diablo, it's coming for me, please stop it, pray for me. And they're like, what? He's like just drunk. And they're like, no. They witnessed seeing him being grabbed by his leg, but something that they couldn't see. He's grabbed by his leg and he's starting to be dragged across the floor, and he's screaming out to them in a panic, like, please pray for me, pray. It's the Diablo, he's taking me. To him, he's seeing this dog grabbing him by the ankle. They all get down, and right away, they were old Roman Catholics, they start praying. He got lucky enough in it, whatever it was, so the story goes, it released him. No short time after that, Grandpa stopped messing with the black magic. So if it took a big black dog, maybe that was the Cadejo, I don't know. But it sure is funny how it took that for him to quit. There were some other fascinating things I found out from them, saying that this Cadejo could be known, has said to have been known as the devil himself, and that he'd eat unborn puppies. He's able to stand on 2 feet like a man and throw punches at people. There's also these magic dogs that are down in Guatemala and El Salvador, and they supposedly protect all the villagers that live near the volcanoes there. So maybe there are a whole pack of white Cadejos, not sure. Moving on, we're going on to another type of entity, which is a little bit deeper into the Dominican Republic and in Puerto Rico folklore. These are known as las Ciguapas, or the Dominican succubus. Ciguapas look like beautiful women. They have like the smooth, glossy skin, and they basically, as much hair as they have, it covers most of their whole naked bodies. And they're described as inhabiting the high mountains of the Dominican Republic. They have nocturnal habits, and they also are said to have their feet positioned backwards. One of the little pictures that was coming through there was an artist's rendition of showing a Ciguapa's feet backwards. And they were like, what does that mean? Well, I'll get to that in a second. People believe that they can bring on death. They said, again, the story says you should never look them in the eye. It says, because if you look them in the eye, then people will say you risk being bewitched by them. They also are known to harp out vocalizations, almost like your Greek harpies or Greek sirens that lure men in from the shores, and they see these beautiful women, even like mermaids. They look beautiful and innocent, but their intent is not. They sound like the chirps and the whines. They said that when these things show themselves to some people, they look very beautiful, but to others they can look very horrendous. they'll lure these guys in and they'll make love to them in the mountains, and then they end up killing them and eating them. And I thought, wow, these are like supernatural black widows, right? The reason for their feet being backwards is so that you can't tell what direction they're moving in. So if people decided they would go out and the villagers would be angry, they're like, we're going to go try to capture them. There's stories of them getting together and trying to hunt down Siguapas, but they can't tell what direction that they're walking in because of their feet going backwards, and they're able to glide through the forest in a different way. They were not sure where this story comes from. They thought that maybe back in the early days it came from like some of the slaves that came to the Dominican Republic from, that they brought over from Africa. But then there was even some ties about them from Hindu culture. I didn't look too much into that. I was more focused on what we were talking about here today. But that was something I thought about looking into too, to see how that ties in. On a side note, personal stories, hearing about something that's close to Siguapas. Our great-grandmothers always tell us, as you were growing up and kids and all like to go to the Spanish dances, and they'd say, as far as the young men would go, they're like, yeah, you're going to go look for the most beautiful girl in there and ask her to dance. They always warned us that if there was one in there that stood out of all the many, to be careful. If you were going to ask her for a dance, always look down at her feet. And we say, why? Because you need to see where her dress goes. And then we're like, why? It's like, if it's covering her feet, be wary. And the grandmas would explain the reason why is because if you get the chance and you get to go home with them, if they're something that they're not, they could be evil like a witch or something else, and they'll take you home and you'll never be seen again. And one way to save yourself from being caught into that trap, if you were able to somehow lift the bottom of their dress to see if the one, they had goat-like feet with hooves, or two, backwards feet. So when I thought about this story with the Siguapas, I was like, that's what the grandmas told us with the backwards feet. I'm like, it's funny how history and folklore and all that tie in even into personal stories passed down through our families. Now I want to tell you guys a little bit about the monster I like a lot, and it really didn't break into our history or the news stories until 1995. Out of Puerto Rico, there's this big outbreak on the news, and people are saying there's this creature being seen everywhere, and these ranchers and farmers, their livestock's being attacked, and they're finding the bodies mutilated, and their throats are slashed, or there's two little holes in their necks or the sides of their bodies, and all their blood is completely drained. Superstition goes, people down there in Latin America are saying, well, maybe it's like a vampire, and they're like, we don't know, and people are describing this. In Puerto Rico, when this thing shows itself, it looks like your typical alien gray. It has the big black shiny eyes, but it's standing on crouch-like feet, and it's able to go down on all fours, big claws and spines going all the way from the top of its head down through its back, big sharp fangs, long forked tongue, almost like an aardvark. It comes out. Some of these guys are saying they see these things in the middle of the night. They're trying to ward them off, and they get away too quick. They can't keep up with them. But these things are attacking the livestock. Some of the people that witnessed these creatures, they said that they even tried to attack them. One guy went so far as saying he's walking home to try to get home to his family, and it comes out and it looks like how you would describe like a pit bull looks, with a big head and stout body, but it looked like this creature. So I'm going to give you guys the name of where this came from. There was a guy, he was a Puerto Rican comedian and entrepreneur, and his name was Silverio Perez. And he was credited with coming up with the term chupacabras. And he came up with this because the word chupacabra means, to suck, and the other part is goat. So called him the goat sucker. They started going down through the Dominican Republic, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, Brazil, and then through the United States and Mexico. The funny thing is, in the beginning, when these stories came out, I found out about, how NASA always has these big satellite dishes and all that. One of the world's largest satellite dishes is in Puerto Rico. I haven't done any follow-up research to see if that satellite was damaged or anything since the big hurricane that happened there this past year. However, there were stories going through saying that this chupacabra creature may have escaped from one of the lab experiments that supposedly was going on. There was a movie in the late 90s. There was 2 versions of it, the part 1 and part 2, and it's called The Watchers. And if you watch that horror movie, I'm into horror too, that's why I'm here, but if you watch The Watchers, there's this creature that comes out of this lab, and then these secret government people send out this golden retriever as the bait, and they send this creature after it, and they put these tracking devices in them so they can see how it plays out. And it's funny because that reminded me of something like the chupacabra. I'm like, is that what's going on? It's experiments to make some kind of new soldier. So as I move on and I look into more of the chupacabra stories, we begin to see heavily amounts of cases happening in Southwest Texas, down by Dallas, San Antonio, and these creatures change and they begin to look like this. You just saw the one that looked like a coyote, so people were trying to play them off and saying it's a coyote with mange. It's just wild dogs, feral dogs, all this and that. The funny thing is there was a lady that was living out on her ranch, and she kept having something killing her animals, and she's like, I'm gonna bait this thing. So she was a hunter too. She had all her high-powered rifles. She waits it out one night, hears whatever it is coming into the yard again, and she's able to track it down and get it to where it's cornered underneath her porch of her house. She shoots and kills the thing, and hey, not like Bigfoot, we got a carcass. We got a specimen. She didn't turn it in right away to examiners, but the smart thing she did do is she chopped its head off for one. She's like, this thing ain't getting back up. And then she froze the head in one freezer, and then the rest of the carcass in another big freezer in her garage. And she kept it there for some time. She finally was able to get some people to examine it. They had a coroner examiner. They had some people from the university down there in Texas. And it didn't turn out to be a coyote like they expected. It's some kind of unknown species of canine. Deputy sheriffs have been able to capture some of these creatures on film. There's one you can see, it's really common on the internet. You'll find it on YouTube, where these 2 sheriff's deputies are actually tracking one. And it's during the day, and it looks like a coyote, but then as they get closer, I'm like, yeah. And they're chasing it, and they can't keep up with it. And they're going as fast as they can on a dirt road, and it finally still gets away. And this has happened on more than one occasion with people. When you look through other parts, like even in Mexico, the chupacabras again change, and I don't know if it's just because when you have a room full of people, you tell your story, by the time it gets to that last person, it's changed dramatically. I mean, it's not going to be the same thing, like how I'm telling you now. You'll have your own version. But this other version of a chupacabra looks sloth-like in Mexico, in the jungles of deep Mexico. It's up in the trees, and its eyes are bright white. And there's a little photo that came through the loop here, and you'll see it again. It looks like it's raccoon-like, and it has the long tongue. That comes from a picture from a guy that's a cryptozoologist. I followed his work for a long time, Dr. Schuker. And he got an artist to draw this picture for him, and I was like, wow, if I seen something like that in the forest, I'd be a little afraid too. But it's interesting to me that the chupacabras didn't start until the 90s, and to this day, there's still reports of them. Some of the other pictures that are in there from the lady keeping the carcass, she turned it into a taxidermist finally when she got it all back. And the taxidermist did a great job. He actually was able to do his best with it, preserve the body. The eyes of the chupacabra were bright blue. The back part of this animal doesn't have typical female or male genitalia. It's just kind of odd. And you can see this on display down there in Texas. I'll have to find the name of where it's at, but it's possible to see this now. And it'll come through in some of this, in this footage here in a moment, and you'll get to see it again. So, with that, I'm going to move on to the next subject. And this next one is one of the scariest three subjects that I'm going to end my talk with today. This one was told to us since we were children. I have some personal stories from it. It comes all the way from Spain and got down into Mexico. They want to say it's a big urban legend. I don't know. Everybody can believe what they want. In Spain, it was called Coco. When it got down to Mexico, the name changed and called him El Coco Man. Then when it got to Texas, it became El Cucuy. He's our version of the Mexican boogeyman. He's said to be a creature that likes to kidnap children that don't behave themselves. According to the folklore, he's very small and hideous. He's a hairy creature with glowing red eyes. He has big ears like a bat and a mouth full of razor-sharp-like teeth like a barracuda. In Spain and in Portugal, and especially in Brazil, parents sometimes invoke the Cucuy or Coco Man as a way of discouraging their children from misbehaving. They'll sing lullabies or tell rhymes warning their children that if they don't obey their parents, the Coco's going to come and he's going to get them and he's going to eat them. It's not the way that the Coco looks, but it's the way that scares it the most. That's what's the scariest thing in the story. He's known as a child eater and a kidnapper. He may immediately devour the children that he comes upon, leaving no trace, or he may spirit them back out to his lair in the mountains, where there's never no return. But he's said to only do this to disobedient children. He's always on the lookout, like sitting like, you know how we have gargoyles on top of churches and other buildings? And they show like angels and stuff like that. The Cucuy likes to sit on these high perches as well. And he watches and looks for children misbehaving themselves. And as soon as he gets the chance, he'll take the shape of a dark shadow and come down and stray the children away. They also said that he's can be a representation of deceased people in your local community. I found a personal story about the Coco Man. There was a guy, I won't mention his name, but he said that he was one of those young people that was like, yeah, right, you know, I used to get in trouble. My mom would warn me all the time, like, if you don't settle down, the Cucuy's going to come and he's going to scratch your feet. And if you don't behave from there, he's going to take you away. He's going to eat you. We're never going to see you again. This guy says, you know, I'm a kid. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm rolling my eyes at my mom. And she's like giving me the look of death, like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell him tonight. He's going to come get you. So he goes to bed. He's a teenager. He don't care. He's going to sleep. He continues his story and he says, the next morning, I wake up and there's these big, red, bloody scratches on the bottoms of my feet. And I think to myself, he says, either the Cucuy came in the middle of the night to warn me and scratch the bottom of my feet, and has given me another chance to change my ways, or is my mother so insane that she came in the middle of the night and cut my feet up? Still scary as hell, isn't it? Either one is effed up. I'm going to take a quick second here, if you guys don't mind. Can I get some water? Because I got two big stories here. I know we're on time, but I got you guys here. Forgive me. I had brought my notes and stuff too, because there's so much detail, and I love that if I don't keep them with me, I'll tell you guys 50,000 stories in 5 minutes, man. I'll be all over the place. The next story I'm going to go on, this derives around the northern Mexican states, like in Chihuahua, in Mexico, near the Rio Grande, in Texas, near San Antonio. Now, the story has many variations to this creature. This one is called La Lechuza, or the Owl Witch. And in Mexican urban legends, it's a myth about an old woman that can turn herself into a giant blackbird or an owl. So she's known as a typical shapeshifter. And in Mexico, and even down if you go into Navajo culture, they talk about skinwalkers and other shapeshifters down there. This stuff's big in the Southwest and in the northern part of Mexico. Especially with witchcraft and all. We talk about every single year there's a gathering of witches in Veracruz. There's good and there's bad. And I sometimes wonder, was La Lechuza one of these witches that was down there and some things happened? Anyways, the story goes that it was a woman, a witch. She was a white witch. She was a curandera, and she practiced white magic. And one day, her craft was exposed. People being superstitious, judgmental, whatever you want to call it, they didn't like what she was doing, even though she wasn't harming people. So they get in a fit of rage, and they get all together like villagers do. They round her up, and they murder her. Because she was so frightening to them that they decided they needed to kill her. And I found that part of the story very, very disheartening, because I was like, this lady was trying to help people being a healer. I'm a healer. My grandfather was one too, so this is why this is kind of personal to me. But karma has a way of coming back. And in this story, it's in the biggest way. This Lechuza, this witch, she is able to have such hate now for these people that wrongfully killed her, that she makes a pact with the devil. And kind of like in the movie The Crow, he gets to come back and set the wrong things right, but she sets it in a way that's like, I don't know, man, that ain't too right. Each to their own on that. But she comes back. In some of the variations of the story, they say that a lot of the villagers were probably drunk when they killed her. Needless to say, she found all the people that murdered her, and she came back and took their lives. She appeared in the form of this giant bat, not a bat, but a witch, an owl. And the owl was said to be about the size from anywhere from 5 feet tall to 7 feet tall. Pretty big, enough to pick up a person. The folklore says that when she came back to seek revenge upon those that murdered her, she also would wait for anybody that happened to be drunk too. So she had it out for anybody. So she wasn't just satisfied with killing the people that murdered her. She wanted to get anybody that was doing wrong like this. So then the story goes that it became more popular down in Mexico and Texas. It said that she could appear at any time she wanted. Particularly widespread in a county called Zavala. She particularly enjoyed attacking people who had one too many bears. Many people believe in her existence, and while others claim to have actually seen this creature, the legend seems to vary quite a bit, which I said. She is a vengeful spirit. She resembles the harpy of Greek mythology too, in the way that she looks, being an old hag face on the body of an owl, and that's what makes her so menacing. It's like, it looks like this giant owl, but then it's got this old witch's face. She likes to prey on her victims, and she likes to hide, and if she can't get people out in the open, she has another way of luring people out. She will like to mimic the sound of a newborn child. And most people, like all the rest of us, if we heard a sound of a newborn baby crying outside, let alone outside in the forest, we're going to be like, man, we better go see somebody damn left a baby out here. We need to go help them. Well, that's where she gets them. She waits for you to go out there, and she's up in a tree or up on a high point on a roof. And as soon as you go out there to try to be the good guy looking to rescue this baby that's out there crying, bam, she comes down and she takes you up and away, and you're gone. And that's what scares people the most. I found a picture on the internet when you see that slide was going through. It showed these two officials holding this giant owl. That's the only real known photo of something that could even be a lechuza. That's the only picture that I know so far that exists currently. And I looked at the size of that owl. I was like, dang, that could pick up a child. That could pick up a dog. I mean, and so if she's able to shapeshift like that, that freaks me out. They describe her a lot to like how I saw in Irish and Scottish culture with the banshees. And in Native American culture, if any of us see an owl waiting outside of our house, it's an omen of death coming for maybe ourselves or maybe for someone that we love. So we don't like to really see owls, and then if we're seeing something like this, it's even doubles frightening to people. I do want to take a little side note here from some of the stories in Mexico with this lechuza. Back in the 90s as well, because I followed so many stories down there about it, on Telemundo they had these Mexican police officers describing that they were attacked by something like La Lechuza. They said it was a witch, like these flying humanoids have been caught on video down there in Mexico near Monterrey. And often in the video you can see it looks like a person, not really like on a broomstick, but like on some kind of apparatus flying away. Well, this cop's giving his interview to the Telemundo people, and he looks like he saw death itself. He said it had come down from this building and it started attacking his car. And, they don't have like these Chevys or Fords like we have here. They got the old school Volkswagens from back in the day. And it left these big scratches in his hood of his car. I'm like, dang, for that type of car, those Volkswagens, they hold up, man. And they have these big old claws in the front. I'm like, whatever the hell that was, I wouldn't have wanted to been out there either. He had one of the artists from the police department there draw what he saw. And it looked like a witch face, but it had the big black shiny eyes. And I was like, that looks like another dang alien. So I don't know, with some of the stories I started thinking about with the folklore, I'm like, made me ponder, is it an extraterrestrial in form, or is it supernatural, or both? I don't know, but it made me curious. So, I'm going to finish my talk here today, and at the end of this particular story, I want to read it to you guys, because that's how it should be told. At the end of it, I'll share a couple of the little personal stories. Some are scary, some are a little bit funny, but they happened in our family. This subject here, I just saw the other day on the internet. The people that made the Conjuring films are now going to make a film on this one. This one is most known through all Mexican, Latin American, Hispanic culture. It used to give me goosebumps when I was little. I'm respectful about this entity. I don't mock it. If it's real, it's real. I've been doing paranormal investigations a long time. I've encountered so many different types of supernatural phenomena, you name it. But this story I hold in high regard because it comes from my dad's people, the Mexica people, Mexican people. This is La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. And the story goes about, in a very rural village in Mexico, there was a young woman named Maria. Now, Maria was like the most beautiful woman in the village, but she came from a very poor family. She was known for her beauty among all things, and people really respected and regarded her for that. And one day, there was a Spanish noble that came through and saw this woman, and it was, in the main stories, it says that Maria was one of the indigenous people. So, hey, the Spaniard nobleman comes through, he's going through the village, and he gets stopped in his tracks when he first lays eyes on Maria. Maria, she was charmed by him, and he was charmed by her beauty. So when he proposed to her, she immediately accepted. Maria's family was thrilled that she was marrying into a wealthy family, But this nobleman's family, they were extremely disappointed because he was marrying into poverty. And I'm like, how's he marrying into poverty? He's got all the money, right? Anyways, Maria and her new husband, they built a little house outside of the village, far away enough to try to be away from the disappointing father. Eventually, Maria had given birth to two twins, a boy and a girl. But her noble husband was always out traveling about and spending a lot of time with his family and all. That's what he was saying. So one day, when he came home, he was only paying attention to the children. And Maria got to this sense that her husband was falling out of love with her and he only cared to come around because the kids were there. And this really made her feel resentful towards her children. So, one day when he left, he didn't return. A few years went by. Maria and her twins happened to be out walking by a river. And she saw off in the distance a familiar carriage. And it had a younger, more beautiful woman in there sitting next to her husband. Yeah, and that's where he had went. She became so angry and confused from it. Without even thinking, she picked up both of her children and she threw them into the river and she made him drowning them. By the time she realized what she had done, the children had already been floating down the stream and she couldn't recover their bodies. Now, in this story, it tries to say that Maria had thrown herself into the river after. In my family, it says that Maria, for the next year or so, just went insane. She stopped eating as much, she stopped drinking, and she got down to where she lost so much weight that she began to look like a human skeleton, a human corpse, and she eventually died from it. When she died, the story goes that she was trying to enter the gates of heaven. But when God asked her, "Where are your children?" her mind came back to her. She's like, remembers, "Oh, I threw them in the river." So she has to now spend eternity looking for her children around the river that she threw them in. And it is said that if you hear her crying, you are to run the opposite way. So if you're ever around rivers or streams or down in the arroyos like in New Mexico and all, you got to take heed around those areas. It says if you hear her cries, they could bring misfortune to you or even death. Also, if you're a child, be extra careful because La Llorona is attracted to children. Thinking that they're hers, she'll abduct these kids and she'll take them as her own, and then she tries to drown them. Children shouldn't walk alone around the river just in case. And many parents in Mexico use this story to scare their children from staying out too late. So, because she's forced to wander the earth for all eternity, she searches in vain for her drowned offspring. She constantly weeps, hence her name, La Llorona. She's caught between this living world and the spirit world. Some versions of the tale, Llorona kidnaps the wandering children who resemble the missing children and asks them for forgiveness, then kills them to take the place of her own. People who claim to say they see her appear at night or late in the evening by the rivers or lakes, and some believe those who hear the wails of her are marked for death, but those who escape in time are not. And she is also credited to being like the Gaelic Banshee legend. She is said to cry, "Ah, mi hijos, oh, my children." And that's her story, and that's what I find fascinating, that all these years growing up, now there's going to be a movie made, and it's called The Curse of La Llorona. I've already got family members, cousins, sisters, people I've grown up with, they're like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not going to see that movie." I'm like, it's left that much of an impact in our culture that they're even afraid to go watch a movie about it. I'm going to go see it. And I hope that they do the story right. I will tell you that my mother's family and my father's family came from a little place in New Mexico called Mora. And the reason why our families moved from Mexico through New Mexico and then up through Colorado and then to Wyoming is because they followed where the work was on the railroads and in the fields. And with them, they brought all these stories. And this is why in lots of our communities, even here in Colorado, you could go and talk to a Mexican family, and I'm sure they got their own version of the Llorona. But it'll stay with the base of, it was a poor Indian woman and a rich Spanish nobleman, and it's a tragic tale of love. Unfortunately, 2 children die from it, and then you get this lost, lonely spirit trying to find them. But my dad and all them back in the day when we grew up in Laramie, he told us of him and my auntie not minding my great-grandparents at the time, and they told him, the Llorona's going to come for you. And like the guy I told you about earlier, they're rolling their eyes like, yeah, right. Well, guess what? They lived here on an open field, and there's a little river there, the Laramie River. And my dad and my auntie, they're both deceased now, and but I remember them telling me this story that they heard her in the alleyway coming for them, and so they crawled under the blankets and they're crying for my grandparents, and I said, see, we told you, now go to bed. That's what I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I do want to give an extra blessing here because I come from my grandfather's people. My grandpa was a curandero. He was a Yaqui shaman. I'm following in those ways too, and I always do this. When I go on a paranormal case, my brothers know this, we went out. We always like to do a unified group prayer before we come in. And then when we leave, we're in an opera house here that we know has spirits now too. And we always talk about parasites. We don't like to have those things following us home. Unless they're good stuff, that's okay. But, don't mess with the lights. I got to pay that bill. But I always like to leave with a blessing over everyone. So if you're all cool with that, I'd just like to ask the Creator and all the 4 directions and the archangels and all that to come over us today. Bless everybody that was here to able to hear these stories and watch these great films by all our talented people. And I'm glad that I got to be a part of this with my family and my friends. So I'll send you out in blessings and peace on your journey, my friends. Thanks.